What's up? Obviously, it's very clear with my coaches on Saturday. We got back really, really late, early Saturday morning, late Friday night, however you want to look at it. That I'm extremely disappointed for our roster, for our staff. I'm not disappointed in our roster or our staff, and there's a big difference, right? And I think it's easy in moments like that to get caught up in the negativity, and there's a lot of things that we can correct. One of the things that I really issued a challenge to our players, right, that when we kind of made our team goals for the fall, and when they kind of talked about what they want to do and what they want to become, one of the things that they were glowingly talking about during that process is, Coach, you've taught us to do certain things. That's just kind of who we are and what we do. We don't necessarily need that to be a goal, right? And since day one, I've talked about before we can start winning games, we got to stop losing them. And I pointed out to our guys, to our staff, that penalties, we were an 8-3 disadvantage. Mental errors, obviously, I don't know how many they committed, but I know how many we did. And in the biggest one for me, turnover margin, we were -2. So those things are part of the process that I want them to understand, and for our coach to understand how we call a game, how we recruit, how we build, how we practice is based on winning those three areas or doing our best to do it. And if we strike out in all three, it's going to be very hard for us to have success. So I think as a staple for us as we move forward, you can always kind of look at those margins and have a great indicator of where the game's going to go. I didn't lose sight of it was the second game of our second season. Obviously, I wanted to win it as bad as anybody. I think our guys have really challenged themselves, something I've been talking about since last spring to where we are today, to not only practice, but practice with the expectation to win. And I don't think there's anybody that can say that our guys didn't go over there with the expectation to win, the way they battled through and persevered through a tough couple moments that worked against us, right? Sometimes things go your way, sometimes they don't. But, we had a situation last week where Julian Pearl basically got hurt in the middle of a practice on a Thursday, which is our lightest practice day. We immediately popped Isaiah Adams out to left tackle, took Jordan Slaughter, who had really been repping at right guard with Zai, moved those guys over to left tackle, new position, left guard, new position, and the way those guys performed for 90-plus snaps was pretty incredible. Obviously, it wasn't clean, but to think about their entire week of preparation, went into different positions, and to play that way I thought was really good. Can't lose sight of two guys, kind of two different ends of the spectrum, but Chase Brown just continues to impress me with who he is, what he represents, the way he competes. Obviously got hit with a tough play, tough hit, and came back even tougher than ever. Brian Hightower just continues to show me on a daily basis how much improvement he's made since we've walked in, and the attitude he carries. I got an incredible message from him. One of the things that happened the week before, I think I mentioned it, Pat Bryant, I think, made a catch in the Wyoming game at the end of the half where I didn't see him tell me he caught the ball. So we made a huge point in our program. Listen, I want you to have faith in me, and I got to have faith in you. So if you tell me you catch something, I want to know, because I want to be able to review it. And when High jumped up, you see him not celebrate, not do anything, but look at me, look to our sideline, and tell me he's catching it. That's a huge moment, right? It gets probably unnoticed by a million other people, all right? But for me, that was everything. He shot me a text. He said, Coach, I wasn't lying to you. I caught that ball. And I shot him a text back. I said, my friend, I don't need you to tell me that, because I knew it by the way you got up and the way you responded, and that's the way we're going to operate in that moment. Also, a couple other guys that I think persevered, right? Isaiah Williams, I know he took responsibility after the game for some of the things that he knows he's got to do better, but for him to play the way he did for 4 quarters, he was kind of battling some elements going into it, and I give Luke Ford a lot of credit. Luke, obviously got caught with a tough hit. It was a bam play. Tommy really tried to help him by throwing it on the back shoulder, but obviously a great defensive play by their guy. And then obviously the hit on Chase, everybody's going to look at it as something that Luke could, with a motion, that defender started a motion away. Luke can't move because he's stationary by rule. He can't change, and that guy created an angle that he made an incredible play and break, which caused a turnover. But you take all the other plays Luke was involved in. He blocked backside and then some C area plays. It was really pretty good. Defensively, I can't say enough the way the game started with Spoon. Just a really explosive player that sees, reads, reacts. The things he saw before that snap even happened and the way he pulled the trigger, that was a bam play, really. That play is very comparable to the Chase Brown play. Just both of those rulings went against us, right? Like, they went in favor of Indiana. I'm sure it was a correct call, but it's just one of those things that it's just unfortunate the way it, because that could have been a scoop and score for us and literally changed the game from the first play, but it didn't happen. And then another guy, Johnny Newton, is just I've kind of said it all along. Johnny, I believe I saw the PFF thing. Somebody put it on my desk that he led all Division I football in pressures and hits on a quarterback, almost double the number of any other D lineman in the nation. And to do that as an interior player is really, truly incredible. And the great news is Johnny is probably going to push himself to even be better this week just because how he's wired, and just a really, really special player right now. And then I give a lot of credit to Caleb Griffin, who obviously in the Wyoming game, things didn't go his way for him to operate and function the way he did as a kicker, not only in the field goal, which everybody looks at, but for us on kickoff coverage, we really had to cover one kick, right? And just really give him a lot of credit for what he did there, and a lot of other good examples as well. So just like everybody else, we got to turn the page, to hop into Virginia. Tremendous respect for this program. It's a little bit unique, right? We got done with the game last year, saw them take the victory kneel, and knew that we were going to have to play them this year, not really expecting them. They became a bowl-eligible team, but obviously transitioned with Coach Mendenhall for whatever happened there, right? So now you're dealing with a new head coach, Coach Elliott, who has had a tremendous respect in our business. Offensive coordinator Des Kitchens is a guy that I've had on my eye on. He's an incredible football coach that has been very well thought of in our profession. He's getting his first opportunity to coordinate. And then their defensive coordinator, Coach Rudd, is a guy that had been at Air Force. Coach Calhoun and I are very close. I've got 3 coaches on my staff who worked at Air Force, so they're very aware of how good a coach he is and where he's at. So they have 3 new coordinators, including their special teams coordinator and offense, defense, and head coach. Kind of the tale of two cities offensively. Their quarterback, obviously Armstrong is a very talented left-handed quarterback, so it's tough to simulate a left-handed thrower. Was a very impressive guy. Up front, they have a lot of guys making their first starts. They really got a lot of transition in the offensive line, but in the back end, or in the wide receiver running back position, you have guys that have played 30-plus games, 32, 34, 36, 25, 28. It's just a lot of experience at the running back, wide receiver positions, and tight end. Defensively, they're completely different kind of where they were a year ago. Coach Mendenhall and his background, what they ran, there is some carryover, but you can see the things they're doing are different from what they did a year ago. So we know that we're going to get great improvement from their units from game one to game 2. A tremendous challenge to come in here, but excited for our guys. I think they're going to have a good week of preparation. A challenge to come back as late as we did, to play as many snaps as we did. Hydration, fatigue, all that stuff factors into it, but we'll get them back this week, and I'd be very surprised if those that want to come to the game on Saturday, I think, are going to see a very motivated football team to be successful and hopefully have good results for Saturday. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
Bret, what have you learned in your years about how to coach a team through a tough, close loss like you just had, and how to flush that?
Yeah, I think 2 things. So first, it always helps when you know your team. So a year ago, maybe coming out of the UTSA game, right, I didn't quite know how to kind of handle our guys, the buttons to push. We got back literally at 3:30 Saturday morning. I crashed on my couch because I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. So I got to watching that film, and I would say before noon, I'd already heard from a lot of our majority leaders about what they want to do, how they want to go about it. It's kind of nice when you, as a head coach, know that before you have to say or do anything, your team leader is already taking that perspective. So I think that's one factor. And the second thing is you have to really understand that these guys, hear the same things, do the same things that you guys do. After a loss, you naturally take an element of negativity, right? And it's very common in today's world to sound off on that. One of the things you have to do is realize there's a lot of really good things that happen. I'm excited as a head coach because, my perspective and my desires have always been to build this thing the right way and let us have a sustained success. And I can tell right now, just the early reactions, right? Like the expectation was to win that game, just like I want it to be. And that's changed culturally around our program, which is great. That's a step in the right direction. So all those things are positives if you view them the right way.
Are 2 games enough where you can look at the film and determine if you need to tweak anything personnel-wise?
I think we meet every Sunday on personnel. So, if there's other personnel options out there, I'd love to hear them. But I love the personnel we got. Like I think one of the things Barry Lunny and Ryan and Sean literally do is I really challenge those guys. We met this morning as coordinators as well as yesterday, and really said, hey, let's get our best personnel on every snap to win, right? And Dark Angelo is playing great rest for us at linebacker. He starts on 4 core phases. Kendall Smith is playing good football for us. He starts on 3. We've narrowed him down to 2. We got guys that I call 4 core guys: Fadonzo, Ryan Mead, and really a couple of other guys that play through. Dylan Rosiak, another guy that plays every 4 core phase to the highest level, and hopefully that's going to give us a chance. So I think we maximize our personnel. Once you get into a season, you got a roster of 74 guys you travel with, but it's really about 60 players that kind of determine your success. 30 on both sides of the ball with a handful of special teams guys. So I love our roster. It's where it's at. But we're always going to try to maximize our personnel. It's a fair question.
Sure, there's plays every week you have discussions with the Big Ten referees about. But when a big play like that happens, what is the feedback, or how do you go about that?
So ironically, after the Wyoming game, I sent in 8 clips. After this game, I sent in 8 clips. I got the results back both last week and this week. Part of our agreement with the Big Ten is we all just want to try to get better, right? So I don't really make public what they say or what we do. I would say that there isn't anything that we did during the course of the game that causes me to rethink what we do going forward. I thought our guys handled the moment. There are some moments that went against us, some bang plays. Conceptually, design-wise, obviously, you probably realize that Chase Brown, if that's going forward, it's not a turnover, it's an incomplete pass. So that's obviously something that we have to make sure we get it on every play. That's the way it was designed. It's just wasn't the way it was executed. And on the flip side of it, we have to react the same way. Like when Spoon made that hit, that literally, the quarterback threw the ball from a yard line where the guy caught it. So both of them had the same distinctions, except for actually the same guy called it both times, right? And both times it just favored Indiana, and that's the way it is. I know Brian went up and competed for that ball not only once, twice, some would argue 3 times, and I think he had positive results, but that's things that we got to continue to grow from. And it's part of the reason I tell our coaches and our players, right, like here at Illinois, we haven't done a lot of great things, right, in the last 15, 20 years. There's been moments of flash and positivity, but it's kind of us against everyone, right? When you're in a position that we are at right now, we have to not only beat our opponent, we have to beat everybody else that we face, right? So I'm not saying we have to beat the refs or beat an opponent coach staff, but we have to perform at a level that's above the expectation for us to get the respect that we want to get. So we don't only have a chip on our left shoulder, we probably got one on our right shoulder.
You mentioned Kendall Smith, and I'm sure he'd love to have the one that goes over his head in the first half back, but then first drive of the second half, he makes that pick. Is that something that a 6-year senior can only do, where he's not going to make that same mistake twice and he can go make a play on that?
Matt, that's probably a great perspective in our room. Like, Kendall has not played a lot of football here, right? So before our first game, going into game week, Kendall approached me and he said, Coach, can I talk to the team? And I said, I kind of have a rule, right? If you want to speak to the team, I'll give you open mic. And Kendall got up and gave a talk about really not even being off the look team till his 5th year last year. And then he entered the portal because he basically thought that, that his opportunity to play would be limited here. And then obviously when certain things transpired, he came back. So even though he's a 6th-year player, he's literally working himself through the first year as a starter. And I thought Kendall's growth from that first to that second, and, to be quite honest, we overcame that moment, right? But, he got hit with a taunting rule. I asked for an interpretation of that, so we grow from that. But that put our offense in a position to have that first score in the second half, which was, obviously a big part of the game.
You talked about you're paper thin in certain positions on Friday night. What does that look like? How does that manifest itself in the course of the game to kind of affect you there?
I give a lot of credit to our coaches. When Julian Pearl went down last week, literally I went up, checked on Julian, I talked to the trainers, to JB and that crew, and by the time I turned around, Bart had already made all the changes we had talked about doing. So one of the things we do on a weekly basis, we kind of call it our roster rotation. So, we'll go into a game, here are our 5 starters at the offensive line, but it's 7 for 5, right? So if these 5 players start, if something happens at this position, we go to our 6th player and plug him into the best position, and to our 7th player. We kind of go down each position, like at linebacker, right? We're a 3 for 2. At defensive end, we're kind of like a 4 for 3. It's how you maximize your roster without slotting them into positions. And at certain positions, it's critical. And then, you look at, I'll just say this, I couldn't have been more. I was upset with Taz at one play, and then I was extremely proud of him the next play, right? So, obviously, in the heat of the moment, you can't lose his cool like he did, but to respond a few plays later and create an opportunity. And, Taz had been battling a little bit of soft tissue, and he just basically said, I can't. He was worried about re-injury and re-aggravating. That's why he wasn't out there to start that. And then he got into play, and he dug down deep and put himself back in that position. So, we have to also be smart about our players, right? Like, player safety is always a premium with us. We don't want to put themselves in a position like Julian this week. I think he's going to be ready to go Saturday, but my biggest concern I told him and the trainers was, like, let's not put him back, right? Because I think he's going to be a phenomenal player when he's at full strength. We just got to make sure it's got to be there. So it's kind of, to your point, it's kind of a case-by-case basis.
Is it a work in progress looking for a second back? 36 carries seems like a lot.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we went into that game with the expectation that Reggie and Chase, we knew exactly how both of those were going to be entered in the ball game. We talked about it during the course of the ball game. I think the way the course, the game unfolded, Chase, it's hard to pull him out, right, for Chase alone, but let alone his coaches. But on the same account, I think, Chase and Reggie this week, we've got to give them a tremendous amount of work so that they feel confident, everybody else feels confident when they possibly enter the game. And then the other guy that's an X factor, Aiden Lawfrey, really wasn't cleared until last Wednesday to play, so we didn't feel comfortable putting him in. But there's another third guy in the rotation. But I'm excited for Reggie. I'm excited for Chase Hayden and Aiden to see exactly what they got this week, because we definitely can't put a 30-plus carry on Chase Brown every week.
Who's logistically the guy who is scout team for Brennan as a left-handed quarterback? Or who do you put out there?
Well, I think the element of what we have to do schematically this week for our offense has to give us still the best passer to throw, right? We don't have a lefty into that category, so we do have some guys that throw the ball left-handed. We'll mirror that in our individual time, because it's a different. So if you have a right-handed thrower, right, your mirror of the throwing hand is totally different than a left-handed. So it's kind of like when you're going against a right-footed punter versus a left-footed punter. You have to make adjustments during Indy, but you really can't adjust the team.
Completely off topic, and I apologize for that. But did you
You
see the
usually
news?
are.
Did you see the news report about the expanding the college football playoff? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think as this game has evolved, like I remember my first year as a head coach, we went 12-1, and we were limited in the BCS because at that time the Big Ten could only have a limited number of BCS schools in the works, and I was trying to push us to get 2, and that was the rule back then. So literally from the first year as a head coach to where we are now, the rules have always changed. I think they've always improved, and I think this is another great example. So the more people that get involved in the playoffs, I just don't see how that can be anything but a positive.
How do the transfer windows affect how you build your roster?
Yeah, there's still some uncertainty and questions on that, because certain guys, literally since fall camp has started, have already entered the transfer portal, right? But on your ability to recruit them, how you can roster count, right? I remember last year, right about midseason, Derek Smith came in and said he wanted to transfer, right? So he entered the portal, so he was out of our conversation. So there's still some works in progress. I think the NCAA has given some clarity, but to me, I think just to clean up that world a little bit, but there's a couple of key areas for us, right? So we are basically a semester-oriented university, right? So teams that are on tri-semesters, they're at a distinct advantage during the winter, because if they're in school, they can have visitors for X number of days beforehand. So you can't have an advantage based on your school system. I just don't see that's inherently fair in the NCAA world. So there's still just some guidelines I think we're going to still deal with and work with, but I think it's a positive step for sure.
Coach, this game against Virginia was set up long ago, before you got here. Down the road, when you can start deciding, hey, let's play this team, what's your thought on that? With 3 games, probably, what do you think of going forward?
Yeah, I think, Bob, first, it's kind of referencing the same question that Doug gave me about the college football playoffs. Future scheduling in college football has changed so much since I became a head coach. Back then, I remember distinctly Coach Alvarez and I in a conversation about playing TCU in a non-conference game. We had a home-for-home with them when I was at Arkansas, but we were talking about playing them at Wisconsin. And the year that we were talking about playing them, we didn't schedule the game, but guess when we played them? In the Rose Bowl, right? They were undefeated, and we were there as their opponent, and lost a heartbreaker in that one. And I just think about that all the time because when you're scheduling things so far in advance, you really never know what the other opponent's going to be. I think one of the advantages of us in expansion is the NCAA, but also the Big Ten is just constantly evolving in what they're doing. Like, we don't even know next year's schedule from a Big Ten standpoint, just like this year it got changed, after the year. So I think right now we're on a little bit of a pause. It'd be a great question for our athletic director because as a head football coach, like, obviously I love input and feedback, but I've always kind of said, just give me the schedule and let us play, right? There's different philosophies, but those might change as well.
I like Coach Fry kind of went both ways. He played really tough teams originally and then kind of backed off a little bit. Do you kind of like that?
I don't recall it that way. I remember being a freshman in 1988. We, I believe, went to Hawaii. It didn't go well, and then we came home and played Colorado, who had a few guys that played a long time in the NFL. And I remember sitting there on the sidelines as a redshirt freshman, going, "Holy cow, what a way to start!" Right? And so again, like, I think every team kind of evolves a little bit. Who would have guessed? Last year playing Virginia, Bronco Mendenhall had this team, put in a position to go, and then the way it unfolded, they have a bowl eligible team that they transition out of. Like, it's an unpredictable world right now in college football. So it's very unique. I remember my first game as a head coach was against Bowling Green in Cleveland Brown Stadium. Omar Jacobs was a quarterback. He had went on fire the year before, right? And we played very well and won that game. But a year earlier, they were a completely different football program. So sometimes the difference can be just that much of one player.
It's only 2 games, but are you getting what you thought you'd get out of Hank Beatty, or is he exceeded what you thought?
Yeah, so there's another case in point. Hank Beatty was a guy that was going to be a game time decision to play. This past week, he had a soft tissue injury that he battled through, put himself in a position. Obviously, it was 1 for 1. But I think as we evolved to the question about personnel, like, these freshmen show you things, right? Gabe Ackas played a lot more reps. I think Aiden Lawfrey will be another guy who comes into it. Obviously, Sean Miller couldn't play, this past week, so that put a little bit more into Hank. I think Hank backing up Isaiah is a really ideal thing. They have very, very similar skill sets. Both of them are great catch and run guys. Both of them are very, very, in my opinion, football IQ. They both played quarterback. Hank played quarterback at Rochester, so there's some great carryover there. I think the combo of Hightower and Casey Washington is really special. Now, to get someone over there behind Pat Bryant, because he's kind of a one-of-a-kind kind of guy. He's a very unique player, guy that's playing at a high level. But I think he'd be the one who would tell you he wishes he had 2 plays back on Saturday, right? So I couldn't be more excited about the growth of that wide receiver room. Yeah, unfortunately, he won't be with us the rest of this year. He'll have surgery that will be a season-ending deal. They kind of haven't nailed down exactly how it's at, but it's obviously something that'll take him out for the rest of this year.
You mentioned it, like, you guys did some really good things outside of those core areas. So when you have a loss like that, like, how much do you balance of positive in the film and things you need to correct?
I think it's just human nature, to be quite honest. Like, that whole bus ride home, Saturday, it was our players' day off. I met with our coaches, let them have a minute to process it, and then that afternoon we met and went over it, and I said this is one of the worst parts of our job is to have to come in after a tough loss that you care about your roster, you know how much it matters to them, but you have to correct the moments, and as coaches we have to correct some things obviously as well. So I tell you, players always bring you back, right? Like, it's old true saying, right? Like your youth and your players, the vibrance that they have and the understanding that they have to correct mistakes is really at a high level. And a year ago, I just didn't know if it was okay. Yeah, they're just listening to me. They're nodding their head and they're agreeing. Now I know the passion. They actually, had a conversation amongst themselves as a group of players that I think they really went over a lot of things. I was more excited last night. We had a meeting for about an hour and a half that went through our special teams and our offense and defensive film. Then we took a 15-minute break. We came back in, and I jumped into Virginia preparation, and I could just see the excitement and energy from them to get ready for this game. So Tuesday's practice, Wednesday's practice, I've scheduled it in a way to kind of be, get them back refreshed, but also have high energy, high tempo, and hopefully hit the ground running on Saturday. The good news for us, it's our second game at home. It's the exact same schedule as week one, so there is some familiarity there that's pretty nice.
Those texts that you said you got Saturday morning from some of the guys, is there any one that you can share that stood out that you kind of reinforced?
High was impressive to me, right? Like because it was a point of emphasis, so I knew how much it meant to him, right? That would be one, just because I've just been incredibly. It's a blessing to be around High. Like as a coach, you always. You know why you coach and you know why you do things. I think the adversity that he's lived through since I've been here, even before we got here, the transition from Miami to here, some people in his life have been through some things he had to live through with us. I remember the first time I came in and he came and met with me, he asked me to change the number 7 and why he wanted to do that, which was just a moment he and I had, So, like, there's just a lot of really cool moments in seeing him play the way he was. And I mean, when that ball went up, like I'm like, okay, I like this matchup, right? And unfortunately, I didn't like the end result, but I would call that play 100 times over. I'd have Barry call that play 100 times over again.
Update on Taz and Jamal. Are they expected to be with you guys this week or
Yeah.
next week?
Taz and who?
Jamal Woods.
Oh, yeah. Taz, he's 100%. He felt really good yesterday. But again, he's a guy that didn't practice all week. Powers that be, because it was a Wednesday, which was like our Thursday, he actually has a class conflict, so he wasn't at practice on Wednesday. So I just really give a lot of credit to Taz. Again, that moment, this is the first year that he's been starting, right? And he's going to learn from that moment, but all of us need to learn from that moment. And then he made that big play to strip it out. And then Jamal's kind of a work in progress. Don't know yet for this week. It's not anything catastrophic, but a little bit on a wait-and-see mode for him. Thank you.